Hello friends, my name is Manushmar from Kube-API. In today's video, we'll discuss about Kube-API Server. So in one of my previous video, we discussed about the master and the worker nodes. In the Kube-API Server is one of the important component of the master node. So let's discuss what exactly it is. So the Kube-API Server is the central gateway for the Kubernetes control plane, exposing the Kubernetes API and managing communication between user, component and the etcd database. So in the architecture video I already discussed, we have a worker node and we have the master node. So in the master node we have something called Kube-API server, and all the another component that we have in the master node like etcd, we have the control manager, all those will communicate with the Kube-API server, and the Kube-API server will then communicate with the kubelet in the worker node, and then that's how the thing will be communicated. So the main communication part that is done in the Kubernetes, that is done by the Kube-API server. So let's discuss how Kube-API server works. So you run a kubectl command. So we already run few times kubectl command to get pod and all those things. The Kube-API server receive a request. The server will receive a request that okay, this command is run. It authenticate and validate the request. That is one of the important thing. Like if any other user validate run that and it's not a valid user, then it's an issue. So it also need to validate and authenticate that request whether it's a legitimate or not. It retrieve and update the data in the etcd based upon the requirement. Let's suppose user run a command kubectl get pods. So basically it's just requesting all the pods. So it will just the request come to the Kube-API server. The Kube-API server will then communicate with the etcd just to fetch okay what are the available pod that in the system and their in which worker node it is, what is their status, all those information it will fetch from the etcd, and then it print out in the user system. And let's suppose it asking to kubectl run pod nginx. So it will then communicate with the etcd, just give the entries, okay, like this is what I want to do. Then it check with the scheduler where is the available resources we have on the worker node, and then the workflow is. So there are two type of queries that we can do. The response is sent back to you. Like if it is a get request, the output will be shown on the screen. And once let's suppose it's a pod creation request, then also once the pod is created, it will show us a request that okay, the pod is created, and let's suppose is there any error or something, it will also show it over there. Now let's discuss about the pod creation request flow. What exactly, if we write a command kubectl run pod nginx, what exactly happen in the background? First, kubelet, because kubectl is a CLI tool that we use. It will interact with the Kube-API server. Then Kube-API server will request to the etcd to store a request. Then etcd server will return back a request to the Kube-API server. Then Kube-API server will check with the scheduler, okay, which is the available worker node. Once the available worker node is done, then the scheduler will give the response back to the API server that this is a node A, node B, whatever the node which having the available resource. It will say okay, this resource having this particular worker node having the enough resource, you can run the pod over there. Then the Kube-API server will request send the request to the kubelet, and then kubelet basically on the worker node, kubelet give the request to the container runtime, like a containerd, not obviously the Docker or Cryo or Rocket, anything that the user is in. Then the container runtime check with the kube proxy, just to because it also need to done all the networking thing. So kube proxy will do that. Then once everything is done, the request come to the kubelet that okay, the pod is running. The request come from the container runtime proxy that our container is done. Then the kubelet will provide an update to the Kube-API server, okay, that this pod is running, pause or whatever the state is, and then the Kube-API server finally store the request in the etcd. Now the queue role of the API server act as a single entity point of the cluster. As we stated in the control plane, it's the only gateway using which the user can interact, handle, authenticate and authorize. Without it, the request cannot be authenticated, validated. So yeah, provided a REST API point if you want to automate using the curl or using an API, you can also do that. Is the only component that directly interact with the etcd. I also discussed this in our architecture video. So this is the only component that directly interact with etcd. Apart from, there is no component that will ever interacted with the etcd directly. So yeah, that's all for this video. I hope you like it. We'll create more video like this in the upcoming future. Hope you like it. If you have any suggestion, please let me know in the comment section. You can also reach out to me over the LinkedIn. I also wrote a full-fledged article, so if you want to know more about that, you can also do that. So yeah, that's all for this. Hope you like this. We'll see you in the next one. Till the time, peace.